Hi, I'm Nan Simonson, and I am with a group of people, and we are honoring our PowerPoint meeting group time, and that is on Tuesdays at 1:30 Pacific time, and there are people coming in from all over the country. And today's subject is caloric density, why that can be the easiest, almost a magical way to attain consistent, healthy weight. It's what I've come to depend on. And one of the things that sort of launched this subject was my preparation for a trip to Europe. I was going to be gone nearly 3 weeks, and I did a talk. You can see that. I believe that would be week number 17 about weight gain and travel, and how that's not necessarily something that has to happen. And then week number 18, I talked about my own experience. I gained about 3 pounds on this trip, and we talked about the food and how that happens. Now I'm back, well, not quite back to what I like to be, but I'm 2 pounds down. And I knew that would happen if I simply went back to eating the way I eat, which in my case for nearly 5 years is whole food, plant-based, not completely SOS free. That stands for salt, oil, sugar free, but I don't add oil to my foods. I don't add refined sugar to anything. I used to sweeten things to make dessert, date paste, occasionally maple syrup, and I restrict salt, but don't eliminate it. So what's the story about caloric density? I'm going to invite you onto a screen share and show you I'll say the contributions on this subject by 2 people. And let me see where, let's get the screen share going. Okay. Excuse me. And just a moment. Get this out of the way. And all right. So caloric density, healthy weight made easy. And I believe it's that way because I have for 5 years now been able to maintain a healthy weight for me without counting calories, without weighing and measuring, without the food fears that for a good part of my life with an eating disorder I had. Food had me almost terrified. If I didn't weigh, if I didn't measure, if I didn't weigh myself once or twice a day, I felt like I had no control, and control felt absolutely essential to me. And I've been able to let all of that go. When I went whole food, plant-based, everything was possible for me in terms of changing a lifetime eating disorder as well as losing the fear of foods. As a species, as a population, especially in the United States, but really in all of the Western countries, I think it's become clear that we have a obesity epidemic, that in this country, nearly 3/4 of our population is overweight, nearly a half are obese. And that is not a judgment as it relates to observation and beauty standards. It is a scientifically proven fact that being overweight can affect our cardiovascular health, our endocrine health. For example, diabetes can allow certain cancers to proliferate. It's simply not good for us. So I want to introduce this gentleman. His name is Brian Hart. You see him up in the right-hand side. He did a program just recently And he's the executive director of the Esselstyn Foundation, as in Caldwell Esselstyn and Rip Esselstyn and Anne and Jane Esselstyn. And so he comes through that lineage. He's the son-in-law of Caldwell Esselstyn. And the talk that he was presenting this some slides on was to the plant-based nutrition group in Wisconsin. And he was, the name of the talk was Common Hurdles and Favorite Plant-Based Holiday Desserts. And he was talking about food, not only during this time of the year, but also why it's so difficult for so many people to jump off that weight gain train. And this was one of his slides. How did we get here as a species when it's natural and normal for most species to maintain a healthy weight? We haven't. He asked people to respond in a chat box. What do you think the reason for this is? I'm not going to have you do that. That's not necessary. I'll finish this presentation and then get back to the group that is in the, I'll call it waiting room. Actually, they're part of this conversation, but in the background of this Zoom call. This is another fellow that I want to introduce, Jeff Novick. He is the one who took the training and the information of Barbara Rolls at Penn State University, who did the initial study of caloric density and how the understanding of the calories per pound of food and putting that into classifications could help people understand how to maneuver in terms of their daily caloric intake to remain satisfied, well-nourished, but also live longer and fight overweight or weight gain and obesity. Well, Jeff Novick is a well-educated man and also a registered dietitian who has since the mid-20s, in other words, not his mid-20s, 2013, 14, 15, 16, I believe this talk was in 2016, has made quite a name for himself because he took her precepts and turned them into very trainable and visual content. For example, this is a caloric density chart of Jeff Novick's that Brian Hart showed us again in his presentation on caloric density. And this becomes the secret. I would encourage you to screenshot it, to copy it, to put it up, and to absorb it into your, I'm going to say your lexicon, your daily lexicon, as it relates to caloric understanding and reference, because I do that. When I think of the foods that I can have ad libitum. What does ad libitum mean? I'm going to go back. Ad libitum means having the freedom or having a free flow based on desire, freedom to choose and eat what you want, when you want, how much you want, as long as you don't overeat. In other words, eat to discomfort. You can, with a certain calorie per pound, I'll call it limit, eat all of your meals all of the time to satiety, to comfort, and not even think about weight gain. In other words, no weighing, no measuring, eating delicious food. And why is that? Because as Dr. Rolls put in years of research, she has a laboratory that has studied this, again, clinically, scientifically, and has proven that this works. That if what she came up with and what she found was that people will tend to, and she did this through laboratory work with observation of groups, people will tend to, regardless of what you feed them, regardless of the richness or the leanness of the food, eat a certain quantity by pound on a daily basis, on an average, on a daily basis. And for most people, that's 3 to 5 pounds. If a person chooses foods that are calorically, I'll call it not calorically rich. In other words, healthy, but relatively lean in calories, meaning 600 calories a pound or less on an average, they can eat to satiety without even thinking about their foods. And we'll show you some examples. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you look at this chart, the first bar is vegetables. There are vegetables that are well less than this 100-calorie bar indicates. You can get, for example, zucchini down to 60 to 75 calories a pound. Broccoli is about 100 and something, 110, 120 calories a pound. Fruit tends to average 250, but as Jeff Novick said, he'll just round it up to 300. That's your fruit. The unprocessed carbohydrates are anywhere from 4 to 5 to 600 calories. And what are those? Those are your grains. Those are your tubers. And then you have your, well, actually tubers are more like the 300-400, tubers being potatoes. That's why there are some people, even the doctor that as a health and wellness and culinary coach I work with and have for nearly 5 years, he has even put people to stop, let's say, binging disorders, to help them clean up food sensitivities and put them on a level, a tabula rasa, meaning get them down to base level, and then let's start adding foods. He'll put them on potatoes for days or potatoes for a week or more. And usually they will lose weight. Why? Because how many pounds of potatoes can you eat? And potatoes are between 350 and 400 calories a pound. So that's well to the left of that 500 calorie unprocessed carbohydrate bar. And then legumes. All of those green bars are what we could call the free eating foods. The legumes are your pulses, your lentils and beans and peas. And actually, one of the things that we look to when we are whole food plant-based for our protein sources, our best protein sources, are the grains and the legumes, especially the legumes. But then you start getting to risky territory. You get into animal protein at 1,000. What you're not seeing there in between that would be something like avocado. Avocado is 700 to 800 calories a pound. Most people won't eat a pound of avocados, but a lot of people love them and eat them daily. My husband, for example, has an avocado every day on an open-faced sandwich with tomato and red onion and sprouts and piles of lettuce. And that's his favorite lunch. He eats it every day. I've been with him for 11 years and he has eaten it for a good part of that time. Well, certainly since we went plant-based, and he keeps his weight very steady. But that's just a part of the average, and the average of what he eats is well to the left of those green boxes. And then you have animal protein at 1,000 to 1,200. You have processed carbohydrates at 1,400 to 1,600 to 2,000. And what are those processed carbohydrates? They're all of the things that we see in packages, in stores, including bread and including whole grain breads. I would say to people, to feed your microbiome, if you're going to have a grain bread, a grain cracker, rather than the refined and the stripped ones, have the whole grain. But still, you're looking at caloric density that will lead to 1,400, 1,600 calories a pound. No, you're probably not going to have a pound of crackers or a pound of bread, but that's something that indicates to you that you also probably aren't going to get full to satiety on those foods. And I'll show you that in just a minute. The junk foods are way up there at 23 to anywhere from 2,000 to 25, 2,600 calories a pound. And what are they? The ultra processed foods, things like Oreos and cookies and apple fritters, and quite frankly, a lot of the food that people have gotten used to eating because they're highly advertised and readily available. You can't even go into a hardware store without standing in an aisle looking at all sorts of highly processed foods that they're encouraging you to buy. Nuts and seeds, 2,800 calories a pound. Does that mean you don't eat them? No, you eat them with deep respect. I have chia and flax seeds every morning, a couple of tablespoons, a tablespoon of each, heaping on my my oatmeal, but that's it. Nuts. Nuts are healthy. For example, walnuts are the highest in your omega-3s. I'll have maybe 2 to 6 walnut halves a day. I respect them, but I wouldn't free eat nuts. Anybody who does is probably in for a weight gain. And then oil. Oil is 4,000 calories a pound. I don't know anyone who eats a pound of oil, but I'll give you a perspective of what even a tablespoon of oil looks like as it relates to satiety, and why, well, several reasons why I don't recommend added oils. Caldwell Esselstyn, it discourages it because that fat that floats in our blood vessel weakens the blood's ability to get nitric oxide to the epithelial cells, the lining of our arteries and our veins. In addition to that, the fat works itself into our muscles, say it again, Nan, intermyocellular muscle. I'm having a hard time with this. Intermyocellular lipids means in the muscle cell lipids, fats. The more of that fatty material in our muscles, the harder it is for our insulin to get in to help us regulate blood sugar. And that is one of the things that research has shown is even more of a factor in diabetes than carbohydrates ever was. That is the fat in our diet. So that 4,000 is something to respect in terms of its the difference between that and every other food. But the other reason that I would discourage people to free flow fats into their food, or maybe even consider avoiding them the way I do, is that I would rather eat my calories than drink my calories, meaning putting them in food where you quite often don't even know they're there because you most of the time can't taste them. So let's go on. All right. Why are things so different now? Because most of our food, over 50%, some say up to 65% of the foods that the Westerners, meaning all Western cultures or wherever our foods have sort of migrated into cultural norms, almost all of them with ultra processed foods are eating more processed food than they are whole foods that are, well, any whole foods. In other words, most people are eating way too much ultra processed food. Up to 65% of our calories are from foods that our microbiome and those gut bugs can't even recognize. And how has that happened and why? Partially because of the fact that we were genetically made to go for the most calorically dense foods that we can when we add salt, oil, or sugar and especially a combination of salt, oil, and sugar, which is in almost all highly processed foods, we can't stop. Our brain lights up with dopamine, which is a reward, but also a drive neurotransmitter. And we want more and more and more. And people are eating more and more to the degree that, again, most of our population is fighting overweight and therefore the diseases that come along with that. So what about caloric density? It means that the quantity in your stomach, well, let's back up. Your stomach has receptors, fullness receptors, and satiety comes along with the receptors notifying us that we've had enough to eat, that we're not still hungry. That first one on the left is oil. You take a tablespoon of oil, and that's 120 calories, and instead, look at a pound of broccoli, which is 120 calories. This one on the right just represents any bulky amount of food, and that's usually foods that are plant-based with a lot of fiber and water added into their cells. And you're looking at a full stomach at 120 or a nearly empty stomach at 120. 400 calories of beef barely fills the stomach. That's why animal products, as well as oils, as well as processed foods, which are really calorically dense, barely fill the stomach and leave people wanting more. Research has shown that ultra-processed foods, when people eat most of their calories from them, will lead to the additional consumption of 300 to 500 calories more a day, while those people are looking for satiety. In other words, they're hungry right away. So this is that same chart from Jeff Novick, and he added to the bottom some examples of what those foods look like. Broccoli, 128 calories a pound. Oranges, 111 calories a pound. Oatmeal, 325 calories a pound, and that's cooked oatmeal, that's not raw. Baked potatoes, 495 calories, red beans, 550. In other words, those combinations of foods made into delicious meals with maybe a little bit of seed or avocado or nuts can create some of the most delicious meals available, and at the same time allow us to eat ad libitum without weighing, measuring, and yet being as healthy as we can be, because our microbiome is being filled, the phytonutrients and phytochemicals are all there for us. The whole wheat bread is 1,100 calories. So, for example, my husband has 2 slices of bread a day, but that is still balanced by everything else that is to the left of that line. And then we get into Oreos, almost 2,200 calories a pound. Almonds, some people can pound down a pound of nuts, especially if they're salted and they're roasted, then they're really dangerous. You've got salt, you have oil, you have a crunchy food, and most people can't stop. And then even olive oil, people think that olive oil is something that they should eat because of the phytonutrients in it. Get those nutrients from whole food and save yourself hundreds of calories per pound. Why should we eat high carbohydrate foods? Because this is what we're talking about. Everything to the left of those red lines, that yellow line, is a carbohydrate food. It's a plant food. Its cells are cellulose, and that is carbohydrate. Carbohydrate foods are the best sources of our vitamins C and E, carotenoids, which are our A's, and those are our among our most antioxidant foods, phytochemicals, magnesium, potassium, B vitamins, trace minerals, energy. A diet that is void or limited in these nutrients leads to severe dietary deficiencies. And think about what happened in the 80s with Dr. Atkins saying, stay away from your carbs, have your meat instead. Short-term possible weight loss, but by the same token, people are not nourished and they're not satisfied. Carbohydrates increase the unrefined, unprocessed carbohydrates, which means as grown in nature, they are by nature high in water, fiber, vitamins, and nutrients, low in calories and caloric density. And we're talking fresh fruits, vegetables, starchy vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and then a measured amount. And I don't mean literally measured, but an amount that is carefully considered of seeds and nuts. All right, what does this look like? A real world example. People, if you are familiar with what is available at coffee bars, think nothing of getting something like this Java chip Frappuccino and don't even realize the amount of calories that they're consuming in one, well, fell swoop. It's probably going to be gone in 15 to 20 minutes. And yet there's nothing in there except excitatory chemicals, but also calories that don't leave someone full for any longer than a short period of time. As a matter of fact, it gives a peak to the blood sugar that then quickly falls. One full pint of strawberries is only 119 calories. What's going to keep you full? 100 calories. 2 chicken nuggets or a bowl, a cup and a quarter of vegetable lentil soup. 200 calories. That's a pat of butter. On the other side, a cluster of grapes. What's going to keep you satisfied? Those are jelly beans. On the other side, we're looking at carrots. French fries. On the other side, a full plate of honeydew melon. Chocolate chips, or actually chocolate kisses, or on the other side, a huge bowl of beautiful fruit. We've already seen that. And then just a reminder, the magic here that we're looking at is that number 550, or we can just round it off to 600 calories per pound. When you're considering, and I do this all the time, for example, I make my husband's avocado sandwiches. Sometimes the avocados are enormous. There would be plenty for me to take even a half of some of the really big ones or a quarter of them. Sometimes I'll do that depending on what else I'm putting on my huge chopped salad. But I'll think to myself, I can have this quarter of an avocado at probably about 150, 175 calories, or I could have a pound of broccoli added on to that, or I can add a half of a cut up cooked potato, which actually holds more sway over me than just a little thin piece of avocado. But in other words, when you get used to considering caloric density, you start comparing. I can have this or that. Like we just saw earlier, I would rather have a bowl of fruit than I would a small palmful of jelly beans that not only don't fill me up, but will actually make me hungrier in the long run. So, is this beyond just weight loss? The Food, Nutrition, Physical Activity, and the Prevention of Cancer Global Perspective, which was a world researched project, a World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute for Cancer Research, 100 scientists, 30 countries, reviewed 7,000 studies for 5 years, came up with a public health goal, and that is that we encourage the public to aim for an average caloric density, and this is per pound, of 567 calories a pound. For me, I round that up to that 600 because it includes the legumes that I always eat. And yet we're not eating only legumes. We're eating to the left of that. And so it balances out easily to 500, 550, 570. And it's an easy way to keep ourselves at a healthy weight. So is this easy? It may be simple, but it's not necessarily easy. But we can neuroadapt. This term refers to the process of our senses getting used to sensations because of the way our sensory nerves and brain interact. Unfortunately, our taste buds have maladapted. A lot of people have maladapted to our industrialized diet of high sugar, fat, and sodium, a diet without the stimulation or the stimulatory effects of the standard American diet, the SAD diet, does not taste, a diet without the stimulation does not taste as good. At first, will have reduced pleasure. Because I've eaten the way I eat, and it's very clean to the left of the red line with nuts and seeds added, and let's say avocado, that's where I would get some extra fat added to my diet. There's nothing more that I could want, because for this period of time, all of those foods taste delicious. In the beginning, I had to neuroadapt. It's less tasty because we're so used to fat, oil, sugar, and salt, but we get used to it. In the sum, the right things can feel wrong and the wrong things can feel right. So how do we get ourselves to be willing to go through a transition period? What's our why? Are we doing this? I know that when I went plant-based, I was told by a cardiologist I needed to take statins. My cholesterol was over 230. I was told by a endocrinologist that I should start considering diabetic medication because I was pre-diabetic. I was told by a rheumatologist that I was on my way to rheumatoid arthritis. I had high rheumatoid antibodies, and that an immunosuppressant would make sense. Think of that black hole I was ready to jump into. A lot of people jump in there and a year later take double the pills, and a year later take triple the pills. You have to know why you make a decision to change your diet, because it is something that affects a lot of things. What are some of your whys? Could it be that you want to be active your whole life? You want to square the curve. In other words, live well, live well, live well, get to the end of that, let's say, line, and within a short period of time, you're gone, as opposed to the usual trajectory, which is at your 50s or 60s, starting to diminish further, and then 8 to 10 years of ill health. That's standard with our population. You don't want to be a burden to your kids. You want to live a long, healthy life, back to squaring the curve. You're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You hate falling prey to food industry lies, because they pretty much guide what all populations eat. The food industry, the dairy industry, the meat industry, they have the money, and they'll fight to the end to keep us eating this way. I know I want to, as I've been thinking about this recently. I have a 10-year-old and 13-year-old grandson, and on my husband's side, there are 2 more children being born within a couple of months. Both daughters are expecting within 5 weeks of each other. One of them already has a 4-year-old. Those grandkids, I would love to be around to see them marry and see them have kids. What about the planet? Do we love animals enough not to want them to be part of all of the, the standard American diet that we're very much avoiding? God, he put us on this planet to be healthy, to live long, to live well, to take care of ourselves and others. Well, we can do that if we're healthy. And then what's best for our country? A healthy population. So bottom line, you gotta wanna. The whys have it, why we would want to, and then you gotta wanna badly enough to make it happen. That's all. Thank you for joining me today. Consider going to Nan Simonson on YouTube, Aging Powerfully with Nan on Facebook and on Instagram, and consider Aging Powerfully, my book. It tells not only the story of the early years, but also how lifestyle as medicine changed everything. Have a great day because you know I'm going to. Bye bye.